This podcast is brought to you by The Secret Meditation. Learn to get in touch with the magical frequency, the frequency that will change your life now. Find The Secret Meditation at www.thesecretmeditation.com. This is Mark J. Ryan, and welcome to the newest version of Hypnosis and NLP. Hey everybody, this is Mark J. Ryan, and welcome to Hypnosis and NLP. Well, a lot of you might be wondering, or not, about the title, Hypnosis and NLP. So let me give you a little bit of an explanation about the title. Basically, I wanted to do an introductory podcast about hypnosis and NLP, teaching people hypnosis and NLP. So when I was talking about things, they would have a basic understanding of some of the more advanced concepts I was talking about. Back when podcasting first came out in 2004, it came out, I think, in the spring and summer of 2004, and Adam Curry was one of those guys, and I found out about it. I don't know how I found out about it in the summertime, and by the fall, I was really excited and interested in it. I was doing some video at the time, and I decided to switch over to the podcasting. And I was playing a little bit with the podcasting once I figured out how to work the technology and get it up. That was the tough part for me. It took me, 2 weeks, and I finally found a guy up in Alaska to help me put it together. Anyways, the shows that I was doing at the time were Podcast King and Podcast Palace, and I was playing around doing all kinds of things. I remember one time I recorded, at that time it was a mini DV, or mini, I can't even remember what it's called, but it was a different type of recorder. It recorded about 1 gigabyte at a time, but it was really good, really clear audio. And I recorded just to test it. Late at night one night, I decided to go get something to eat at Burger King. I was hungry. And as I was driving up the street, I'd noticed that one of my relatives, my aunt's trash cans had blown into the road. There was heavy winds. And I got out of the car, and I was recording this whole thing, the whole car ride, talking the way up there, and then talking to the girl at the window at Burger King, and eating my hamburger, and came back. And I just put that up as a podcast and then sent it to a friend of mine in England. And he was listening to it, and he called me back a little bit later on and said, my daughters are listening to this, and they're just laughing so hard. They love it. They want you to do more of it. So I said, I had a sense in the beginning. That's why I got so excited and spent the few weeks learning how to do the technology, which was very new and very difficult. It still is fairly difficult to do, but back then it was really difficult. And at the same time, I was going through some internet marketing courses, and I was learning about keywords, and keywords like what you type into Google to look for something, and how to use keywords for your best responses to get the answers that you want. And there was a couple different ways of finding out which keywords were top keywords. And at that time with the internet, most of the people on the internet were guys. I think it was like 70 to 80%. The people in podcasting, it was more men, even higher percentage-wise. And I was looking at keyword search, and sex kept coming up on top. So I said, well, I'm just going to go into the adult section, and I'm going to use sex. I was also teaching a lot of guys how to use hypnosis and NLP to have better relationships with women. And I was having some fun with that in my younger years. It was 10 years ago. So I decided, let's see what happens if I name a podcast with the word sex in it. And I had like 3-4 different podcasts at the time. And the ones with sex in it all of a sudden shot like a rocket. So all of a sudden, I was a guy that was going to start using NLP and hypnosis and start integrating it with sex. And the podcast became extremely popular. And I got a lot of hits on it. So I said, let's take this and run with it. Let's see what we can do. So much of the stuff that I was doing was using hypnosis and NLP in a way. A lot of guys were using it to teach guys techniques. certain things to say to women, to talk them in, using advanced techniques to try to get them into bed. Basically, meet them at a bar, talk to them, try to take them home or get into relationships with them. And people say, wow, that's really manipulation and everything like that. And in a sense, it really is manipulation. But at the same time, you look at the other end of the scale and you say, okay, what does a woman do? She puts her hair up. She puts lipstick, she puts makeup on, she puts perfume, she dresses up to a T, shows off certain parts of her body and, outlines other parts of her body and shapes. And what's that for? That's to attract men towards her, to create a certain effect by manipulating what she looks like. It's not necessarily who she is, but it's what she looks like, and the first impressions count, especially if you're out meeting somebody. And so I noticed with a lot of guys, especially being in the computer field, I was a computer programmer, that a lot of these guys had never even been on a date with a woman. And the people that I was talking to on the podcast were a lot of computer guys, computer geeks. And they wanted to know about women. They would write me, they'd email me and ask me questions. What about this and what about that? And I realized, growing up with a family full of women, 6 women in my family, and that I understood a lot of these concepts. I was around a lot of friends who were very good with attracting women and dating a lot of different women, and I would use the NLP techniques to model them and say, what are you doing? What's different, to continue to improve who I was and what I was about. And I noticed there was 2 different types of ways of going about this. For the lack of a better word, we'll say seduction. Seduction, getting to yes. What words, what things you have to do to seduce somebody, male or female, to get to that place. And so I noticed there was 2 different, really there was one way of doing, and that was a lot of times cheesy pickup lines or sleight of mouth patterns, which is an NLP way of making your words a certain way to get into the woman's mind or the woman getting into the man's mind. There's some books written about how women can do this to men too. And I was on that course, but I was also, being a single man at the time, but also I was interested in a lot of spiritual things, a lot of higher value stuff. So I said, okay, I'm on this path. I've got this podcast that's going, and what do I do to combine the 2 of them? How do I combine the 2 of them? And I said, the idea came to me, why don't you use hypnosis and NLP with this in regard to the seduction field, which has a lot of cheesy stuff going on in it, unethical things going on in it, and teach them a different way of doing that without really. So in a sense, I was seducing my audience, seducing the people listening to the show in a different way. They thought they were going to come and get an easy way to do things, and all of a sudden they'd have all kinds of women around them. And short term, some of that stuff does work, and it's very powerful. And in another way, it was to me more about who are you as an individual, man or woman? Who are you as an individual that can attract the type of person that you want in your life? And so I went at it from that angle. But I did pander. I did use the name sex and seduction and things like that, and had a lot of fun with it. I did have a lot of fun with it. Angered a lot of people. Some of the people in the field of NLP, I was rising in that field, didn't like what I was doing at all, and made it very clear and known to me that they didn't like what I was doing. But yet there was other people using NLP and hypnosis that were using it pretty nefariously in sales and in seduction in different areas. And I said, where's the in-between? Where's the middle of this? How can you use this in a way that is going to benefit the person using it and the person that it is being used with? And so I said, okay, let's improve who that person is to the best I can. Let's take some of these spiritual concepts that I'm understanding and put them into meditations and thoughts and products that I was selling that would have people, men especially, be different people, start to become different people and get what they wanted from the seduction. The end result was, they wanted to be having relations with women and being in a relationship with women. How could they get that, but yet at the same time get something more, something that would interest them more, change their lives? And we used to get letters after letters from people, guys that were on the show, listening to the show, and then I'd have their girlfriends and wives write me on the side saying, I don't know what you're doing. with my husband or with my boyfriend, but thank you, keep up the good work. And so I started to get real curious, like, okay, what else is going on? And over the years, over the 10 years since I have done the show and stopped doing it, I think in 2006 or 7, and I think I did 1 or 2 in 2008, but that was more marketing stuff. So in the 8 to 10 years that I've stopped doing it, I've continued to get letters from people and had friendships with people and done a lot of coaching with guys that had never been on a date before and now are in great relationships, have family. And I would get letters from people that would say, they were picked on at work, and now the guys want to take them out and go out with them for a drink. I've had in 1 week 3 different guys that were saying they had plans to kill themselves, and after listening to the podcast and they had a better understanding not only of who they were but the women around them, they started looking at things differently, perspective, and decided not to do it. So there's people that are not going to like that aspect of it, and you may not like it now, but I would say wait till the end of it and go through a few of this and see what you learn, see what you get from it and what it may do for you, man or woman, and watch the difference that hypnosis and NLP can make. We're finding out now with neuroscience that hypnosis and NLP was pretty well right all along. The things that they were doing, the how of what they were doing. Neuroscience is now finding out that the parts of the brain through the techniques and the exercises that we're reusing and the therapy and the coaching that we're reusing is now becoming more, pinpointed, more accurate. And to know that the how, since I've been doing this for about 30 years now, is getting even more exact. So the study of neuroscience, which I've been doing in the last 5 years, really heavy, has got me excited about all the learnings that I did before with hypnosis and NLP. And really hypnosis, it's in its first incarnation, James Braid called it monoideaism, one idea. And it's the practice of attention and focus. And all these new meditations that you're starting to see today, I put an article up about Arnold Schwarzenegger and somebody else that was popular. They were talking about meditation and how important it is. And hypnosis is monoideaism, one idea, and meditation is really the focus of your attention away from a lot of your internal dialogue, thoughts, and pictures into a quietness so you can start to pick up some other information, some deeper information about yourself. But just the process of quieting down your mind and being still shifts all kinds of things and chemicals in your body and your mind to put you more at peace, more at ease, to have you live a better life, to take in information differently, and to be able to then assimilate that information throughout the day and use those states to have a better day, to not have such a stressful day, to not have your mind going all over the place, but to be able to take in a different level of information and coding that we see in our environment that makes things better. The same type of thing happens when you're interacting with people. And again, where I came up with the shows and just continue to call it sex, hypnosis, and NLP because I went on there. I lost track. They had a thing called Feed Burner, which burnt my RSS feed, which is part of the complicated part. They went out of business, but then Google picked them back up again. But I lost all my passwords. I wasn't able to update the shows, the feeds, and a lot of the links to the audios were gone. Lost a lot of audios, and it basically was like a lock safe with these shows going. And for a while, I just wanted to take them down because that wasn't part of my life anymore. I had met somebody in my life and been with her for 8 years and got a 6-year-old girl that's going to be 7 in the summertime and a 13-year-old boy that's going to get ready to be 14. And really didn't want them to know about this or see this. And also some of the people that I had talked about in these shows, all of a sudden, because my ranking was so high at one time for the podcasting in my name, that anything that I put out there, next thing you know, when you searched on their names, the top, is with Google, the top organic search was the Sex and Seduction podcast, and there was their name in it. So here you go with some of these big NLP trainers and big names in the business of influence that all of a sudden are getting ranked from my podcast. The top thing that people see when they type in their name is my podcast and their participation And I was just trying to promote them as great trainers. One of them was a friend of mine, and she, trainer of mine, and she was getting ready to go into ministry, divinity school, and unfortunately, to me it was funny, but it wasn't funny to her. She was very upset with it. When she Googled her name, or when somebody Googled her name, it was coming up with the sex and seduction sites. So I did my best to take that down and make it right for her. So that wasn't there anymore, but it did affect people in a negative way. So I stayed away from it. And then I did some stuff with Joe Vitale for a while. That business relationship lasted about 4 or 5 years. Our friendship was longer than that, but Joe started doing some slippery things that I did not approve of ethically. And, obviously I'm doing some sex and seduction stuff, so I'm not one to judge on the ethic part of it, but how he treated people, what he was doing, taking things from other people, which I don't really want to go into. There's other ways you can find out about that. Some of the things that he was saying became like a different person, and so I broke off that relationship. And I've pretty well been doing my own stuff, more spiritual, staying with a lot of coaching, doing coaching with people. I was doing some golf coaching for a while, some experimental stuff with golfing, and 48 golfers that we did some research with in Texas, in Austin, Texas, with a pro down there who was friends with Hank Haney and a couple other people up in Dallas, some big names there. And we got some amazing information. But basically, living here up in Mount Shasta, I haven't been doing much anything. And my wife keeps saying, why don't you get into podcasting again? Why don't you do the podcasting? And I've been doing a lot of video. I went around and filmed Igor Lidahowski and did some stuff with Kevin Hogan, and been filming a lot of John Overdurf stuff. And so I took the filming business and kind of kept on the side and kept quiet. And now what I'm finding is that I want to get back into this. And I realize that a lot of people want to know about this information and this material and how it can benefit them, because it can benefit you in your relationships. It can benefit you in your job. It can help you make more money, whether it's in your business or in sales, because it's the study of success and how people do things successfully. And after doing this for 30 years or more, I've learned a lot. And a lot of the stuff that I'm into now is advanced stuff. And the things that are happening with the neuroscience, the combination of those two, to get people to understand it, a lot of times they have to have a basic foundation. And a friend of mine I had asked down in San Diego, his name is Jeremy. I said, Jeremy, he was teaching a lot of the spiritual stuff and some of the NLP stuff, and he had some meetup groups down there in San Diego and basically giving the stuff away, teaching it for free. And I asked him, I said, how come you're not doing anything for money? And I said, why are you doing this? And he said, I'm doing it because I'm kind of lonely. I want some people to talk to. So I figured if I could teach people a little bit more of this stuff and they could know the basic foundation, and then I'd have friends and people that want to talk to me about the more advanced stuff. And I said, God, what a great way of looking at things. That's really a beautiful way of looking at things. And so I've really started to come across his point of view and say, I can teach a lot of this basic stuff. I don't really want to go and teach an NLP course. I'm certified to teach NLP practitioner, master practitioner, trainer's training. I could teach all that. But do I want to teach that in a course style where people have to come? Obviously with the economy and everything, I've seen a lot of friends that are in the business, their numbers have dropped in half or down to a quarter of the amount of people that used to come to seminars. They just can't afford it or don't want to afford it, and they're getting a lot of their information on the internet. Excuse me. And so what I want to do is be able to start teaching in my way, and it's not going to be perfect. And if you've got insights and you've got questions, or you say, hey, that didn't sound right, or I've got some new information for you, I'm open to all that. And I want to teach this in my way, the way I like to teach it, that I'm going to have fun with it, to give a foundation, a basic foundation of how hypnosis works, how NLP works. Again, I did this back in 2004, 2005, 2006, in that area. I want to bring people up to date with it. But yet, when I went back and started listening to some of those podcasts, we went back and did some searching between Kathy, my wife, and myself, and found everything but episode 9. So if anybody out there's got the episode 9, volume 9, sensory acuity, visual, Milton Erickson stories, and could send me that one, some of the old listeners, I would love it. And we'll make it worth your while. We cannot find that one, but I found all the other ones and was finally able the other day, after spending almost 2 days, to hack into my feed burner links, which I thought were out of business, but Google bought them up, but they're not supporting it anymore. But I was able to get into all my podcasts and still like 2,000 subscribers. And I'm saying, okay. At one point, I think I burned down the servers. When I first started podcasting, they took me on iTunes, GoDaddy.com, the name domain, were calling me up and saying, you're frying our servers. What are you doing? I started telling them about podcasting. They had no idea. I had to teach them about podcasting. But at one point, we calculated we were getting about 180,000 unique hits a month. That was back during that time period sometime. And I still have 2,000 subscribers left. So it's like, okay, let's talk to some people and see some new people that want to learn and put a different angle on it. But when I went back and listened to the podcast, there's a ton of great information still in those introductory NLP and hypnosis courses. And people would write me and say, that's some of the best NLP and hypnosis training I've ever had. Where are the rest of the links? And I'm like, I don't know. Can you do another show with this? Years later, we're talking 8-10 years later, people still finding this, 2,000 subscribers still there that have been sitting there for years, 7 years, I think, since I've done the last podcast. And I said, maybe it's time to go back and get in touch with people again. So that's what I'm doing. And I would love to hear back from you. I'm big on communication. I'm big on questions. I like to know what you're thinking, what you're experiencing, even if you're saying, hey, thanks, I'm listening, I'm here. If you've got any questions, if you've got any suggestions, if you've got any updates for me, let me know. But what I did, basically, I'm going to go back, and the information, there was like, I think about 9 to 11 hours of information that I was given about the basic hypnosis and NLP, mainly NLP to start off with, but I'm really going to get into the hypnosis too, because that's popular. And change your frame. If you think hypnosis is a bad thing, you're going to find out that with the neuroscience today that it's just a way of processing information in your brain. It's a way of looking at things. We're in hypnosis all the time. Trance, if you like the word trance better, if you like the word visualization, if you like the word daydreaming, whatever, prayer and contemplative meditation, it's very similar. And I want to make some distinctions between that and meditation, but how this stuff can all help you. I'm looking for it to help you. And selfishly, I'm going to say I've got products out there. I'm going to want to see maybe that you're interested in what's going on here and some of the products that I have. And I'm going to start doing seminars again pretty soon in some of the more advanced ways of thinking about hypnosis and NLP and some of the leadership stuff that's going on now. It's changing how corporations do business. It's changing how people think about the world and do business in the world. And I want you to be a part of it. The first thing you got to do, though, is learn the foundational part of it. And I want to give you that as best as I can so you can know that while you're out there, whether you go to an NLP course or you start practicing and playing with this, that you will at least have some kind of head start, maybe even be way ahead of people that have no idea what this is. But then there's also a lot of people that are really advanced at this, and you may find out that you have been, how could I say it, influenced, persuaded to do things using this technology, and you now start to understand, oh, that's how he did it, that's how she did that, they understand that. So it kind of brings you back onto the level playing field. But if you have relationships with your children, your wife or your husband, people at work, your employees, your employers, this will definitely improve it. So the first one that I did basically got into a little bit about NLP, what it is, the audio, the quality of the audio is pretty good still. It's I used to compress it way down because bandwidth was super expensive back then. As I said, the situation I got into with GoDaddy would have cost me thousands of dollars, but because they didn't know what podcasting was, and they kind of said, look, we're new to this and we're not going to charge you for it, but you got to start making these files smaller and not so many. So I think at that point I kept with them, but also went over to Libsyn, which had unlimited bandwidth. They were the first one to start that I knew of on unlimited bandwidth. But anyways, so I compressed the files a little bit more than I will now. The clarity that I'll be using now will be more. I'll also be including videos in this process. So things that I don't want to try to explain for a long period of time with my voice, it's going to be a lot easier just to get on my whiteboard with my camera. I got all kinds of professional high definition cameras and audio, and just show you, just draw it out and show you so you get an understanding of that. So again, the audio is good. It's going to get better. However, these first podcasts, I go back and listen. I said, this is still relevant. It's all being taught right now. It's great information. This one, I mostly talk about some NLP, the history of it, different levels of NLP, my history with NLP, how I started it, what got me started in it. Talk a little bit about the map is not the territory. And when we talk about the map is not the territory, if you look at a road and you drive a road, the map that you look at on Google Maps or Rand McNally map is a representation of it. And what we do in our head is a representation of things. It's not the actual territory, but a representation. This is a very important thing, and I've got a whole podcast that I've done on just the map is not the territory. And recently, and I say recently, within the last week, I talked to a friend of mine who actually built roads, gave me just some incredible information years ago, and then I talked to him again and said, hey, can you update me with some of that? So we're going to get into the map is not the territory, and that understanding alone, if you can get that, will absolutely change your life, let alone everything else that you're going to learn. I want to kind of take this in a different spacing as people are interested in it, as they correspond back and forth with me, ask questions, make suggestions. That's going to determine how quick I go through and edit these things, put new information in there, bring you up to date of where I'm at and how this is important to you and what it's going to do for you. The other things I talk a little bit, again, what is NLP, how it's used in sports to improve things. I get into talking a little bit about phobias, people that have phobias, people that are afraid, that have a stimulus response reaction, a synesthesia type reaction. And it's not synesthesia in the actual medical way. It's a term in NLP where you get two different stimuluses from different areas, let's say like auditory and visual, where you got a picture and you hear a sound in your head and it scares you. So every time you see a snake, or somebody sees a snake, it's an instant reaction. But people have fears of certain things, and I get talking a little bit about phobias. We'll be talking about that more into the series as well. And Richard Bandler, one of my favorite characters. A little bit about John Grinder. I know more about Richard Bandler. I've studied with Richard Bandler. He was one of the co-developers of NLP, which I'll talk about in this podcast that you're getting ready to hear. This is just the prelude to that podcast. And basically, it's me 10 years ago. And I'm talking at a pretty good speed. I'm excited about what I'm talking about. Some of the information, I pulled most of the dated information and kept the up-to-date information in there. But if you've got something you've got a question about there that's not clear, please do write me. And the best way to write me is mark@markjryan.com. Mark, M-A-R-K, at Mark, M-A-R-K, the initial J, which is my middle name for John, and then Ryan, R-Y-A-N.com, markjryan.com, mark@markjryan.com. As Tony Robbins says, repetition is the mother of skill. So here we go. This is the history of NLP, my history of NLP, and a little bit of other information in there. The way I talk, I'm a more of a non-linear guy. I have a hard time sometimes going linear. I tell stories. I go around in circles, more of a gestalt, whereas by the end of the time you get done listening to this podcast, hopefully you go, oh, I got a better understanding. Okay, so I'll hit you from different angles, telling you stories and putting little bits of information in there. that I'm looking for your unconscious by the end of it to kind of put it together and go, oh, I see how that'll benefit me. I see how that'll work for me, how that'll work for others around me, and how that can be very useful. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Feel free to send it to as many people as you can. Let them know about it. You're going to get a quality class, first class NLP hypnosis training, probably over the next 3-6 year, depending on how interactive people are with this. So enjoy the show. Write me if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you soon in the next podcast. But for now, here's the introduction and the first podcast I did about 10 years ago, and I just edited it today. Enjoy. This is Mark J. Ryan. Thank you. So I want to expand that out and start teaching some of the basics here. NLP has 3 different levels, actually 4 levels. They've got practitioner, which is a 2-week intensive course where they usually send you about 30 to 40 tapes ahead of time, have you study them, and then once you get it basically down, they take you in for 2 weeks and thousands of dollars and teach you these techniques to become a practitioner. And then there's master practitioner, which is another 10 days. Then there is the trainer's training, and then there is master's trainer's training. I have gone through 3 different levels, and I've probably taken the practitioner, I think, 3 times, and I've taken master pract 4 or 5 times at least, not counting the amount of tapes. So I've spent quite a bit of money learning this and getting good at it, using it with my clients, using it with sports. And I'm thinking about maybe if we get into the master practitioner level stuff of offering some CDs and hopefully maybe I can make some money out of the deal somewhere and teach some people some advanced stuff. But I'll tell you what you're going to get out of this course, what you're going to get out of this podcast is going to be huge. It will change your life, guaranteed, or your money back. Well, it's free, but anyways, stay tuned, pay attention to this. And I guarantee the success that you're going to have in relationships and the success in what you want to do for yourself will dramatically improve just with a lot of the introductory stuff I'm going to teach you. I'm figuring it's probably, well, we'll see. Maybe we'll get to the whole practitioner course, which is, like I said, a 2-week course. It would probably happen over a period of several months, depending on how quick I want to, go through all the material. I've got reams and reams and reams of material. This is the basic stuff that I'm getting. I learned it. How did I get involved in this? Back in 1986. Hypnosis I've been doing since I've been a kid. Back in 1986, I picked up down in Florida, a friend of mine's house, a book called Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins. And, he was in the back room arguing with his girlfriend, so I knew that was going to be a while. So I picked up a book, and that happened to be the book I looked at. And got to the point where I was hoping he was going to argue with his friend a whole lot more because I didn't want him coming out to stop me from reading, because I knew once he came out, he's going to be going, let's get out of here, and I'd have to stop reading the book. So he did. He stayed in there for a while with talking it through, and he was apologetic when he came out, but I had a good chance to look at that book and said, this is something I want to learn, and told him I wanted the book, and next thing you know, we're arguing about the book, and I had to offer him some extra money than what he paid, and he finally said, all right, take it, because I was on my way back to Texas. I was living in Texas, visiting him in Florida at the time. So I got the book, read the book, loved the book, fell in love with the book, and said, where did Tony Robbins learn this stuff? He didn't give too much away in the book, which for reasons I found out later, there were some legal things going on. But I did find out that where he got the terms, he didn't use NLP really that much at the time. It was more NAC, Neuro-associative Conditioning, because he had gotten to a little spat, I guess, with Richard Bandler over the deal, over the name. So he stayed away from using the name. Went back, researched NLP, found out that there were some books written by the founders, Richard Bandler and John Grinder. Went back and studied those books. One of them was Frogs into Princes. Another one was Reframing. And then there were some books by Connie Ray and Steve Andreas about some of the trainings that they had learned and some of the things that they had learned from Richard Bandler and from John Grinder. Amazing books, extremely hard to read. I remember Frogs into Princes, which was a seminar written book. So somebody wrote it from the perspective of attending the seminar. And I had to read that book I don't know how many times. I didn't understand a thing it said the first time through, but there was a couple points that really just like, wow, I got that. That is interesting. That's amazing. And after reading it, like I said, 3 times, who knows, maybe more than that, I started to get what was going on there and found it extremely useful. Started getting some videotapes, audio tapes. This is back in 86, I think it was.
and then started using it on people right away. I'd take some of the techniques right out of the books and get people to stop smoking and get rid of phobias and different things like that, and said, this stuff is cool. I started using it in sales. I was doing sales back then, and then actually selling cars, and my sales were phenomenal. I was first month there, number 1 at the dealership, number 2, tied for the second month, got hired as a sales manager in New York. This is when I was living in Texas, and then I had moved up to New York, which was kind of a bummer type thing, but it was the results I saw from using NLP totally convinced me. At first, just the theory of it was really exciting, because I could think about all the possibilities, mainly having a lot to do with making money, but number 1, getting women more interested, having more fun, and having more sex in my life. So I figured it worked well for me back then. It still works extremely well for me now, and I could start teaching this technology to people, because it's not just about sex. You can use it in every area of your life. And the thing about it is once you start using it and once you get an idea of what this is about, it can't help but start changing the way you look at the world, the way you approach the world, the way you interact in the world. The thing that Richard Bandler and John Grinder were doing back in the mid-'70s when they started NLP, let's get into a little bit about the history and what NLP is at this point. There's an anthropologist who was married to Margaret Mead, and his name was Gregory Bateson. And he had been studying different therapists around the country that were incredible with their work with people and really were getting results. And he identified 3 of them that he wanted to send Bandler and Grinder to study. Richard Bandler at the time was a mathematician and a computer genius, so he really understood mathematics and computers, and John Grinder was a linguist, both of them out of Stanford University in California. Again, this is the early 70s, I believe it was. First book was 1975. And what they did is they went and they started studying a gentleman named Milton Erickson, who was, in my opinion, and many people's opinions, the greatest hypnotherapist that ever lived, probably one of the greatest healers that ever lived. People that couldn't get results in their therapy sessions and in their practice would send people to Milton Erickson down in Arizona at the time, and they were getting tremendous results. Therapists were going to learn and train underneath him and coming back and not knowing what happened because they'd been in such a deep trance, and yet profound changes were happening in their lives too. So Bandler and Grinder went down to study him. Another man, you might have heard of Gestalt therapy, Fritz Perls, they went and they studied him. Actually, Bandler was looking at his material so much that he started recognizing patterns in it, because as a mathematician and computer programmer, you start to look for what patterns are. So I went to school, I'm a computer programmer myself. You want to know where the flow of information goes, and you start to recognize where this flow goes to make your job easier if you're programming a computer. And so Bandler was able to start picking out some of the things that Fritz Perls was doing and modeling it. And what he said is, I think I can do some of this therapy with some clients. And that's what he started doing. He started reading some of the patterns that Fritz Perls had from his work that he had recorded and transcribed, and started getting amazing results from it. So they knew something was working in the language, and we'll get into the definition. NLP, neuro, and L is linguistic, language, programming, which back in the 70s, programming was hot and it was a good word. Now we look at it and we think about, cults and different things like that. So a lot of people have changed it to psychology. The people I studied under for a long time, John Overdurf, Julie Silverthorne, they call it HNLP, Humanistic Neuro-linguistic Psychology. Their whole deal was, and what Bateson wanted to do, who was an anthropologist, was to study what excellence was about, how to create excellence. Most of the people in therapy had modeled for years and years what's wrong with people. They could tell you every distinction about what was wrong with somebody, what problems they had, why they had it, and their theories on it, but not a whole lot was being done about how to fix them. What made somebody well? What was the process of if somebody was ill and then became well, what happened in between there? Today, a lot of that is again, with the drugs that are being put out there with people, which is phenomenal. It's another reason that I'm doing this. I know a lot of people that are on those drugs. Have helped an awful lot of people stay off those drugs, get parts of their life back in order that made their life worth living without the drugs. Some people, like I said, it's beyond that. I'm not going to say everything is curable or can be done with NLP. I think a lot more than what's given credit for at this time. It's about how to create excellence, how to model. So what a lot of these guys were doing was finding out these therapists that were doing good. One of the things they discovered was that people that were excellent at anything, they had a clear outcome. So one of the things I'm going to ask you is during this training is, what is your outcome? One of the things in the podcast that I do, I was talking about a woman recently in her 50s, beautiful woman, great pianist, just very successful at what she does. And she was talking about men and how there was basically no good men out there. And we went through a whole bunch of questions, and I finally got down to it because I knew just by the way she was talking, she was all over the place. She did not have an outcome. She had no clue. And I finally asked her, I said, hey, look, let me ask you a question. Give me any guy, living, dead, in the movies, fictional, nonfiction, that you look at and can say, that is the ideal man. That's the man that I want. And she stopped and went dead. And I said, past boyfriend, present boyfriend, what? She goes, wow, I'll have to think about that. She goes, I really don't know. And I said, that's why you have the problem, and that's why a lot of women have no clue what that they want, because they don't have anything. They can tell you 1,000 times what they don't want, but they can't tell you what they do want. So for this training, say, what is one of the outcomes, a clear outcome that you have? Now, as we go through the training, we're going to have you describe that outcome in special scientific type of ways, NLP-ish ways, hypnotic ways that will turbocharge and advance this dramatically, because I've also studied a lot of the spiritual work that's being done out there now. I've studied a lot of spiritual masters, look through the Bible, studied Jesus, and found out what are the common things that these people are doing to manifest the kind of lives that they want. So it's not just going to be a process of teaching you NLP. I'm going to go into probably a little bit of manifestation and how that works, because it goes perfectly in with NLP about how to set clear goals and clear outcomes. Now, one of the ways Richard Bandler says in some of the videos and audios that I've listened to, he's described about how the name NLP came up, Neuro-linguistic programming came out. And he said when he was trying to find a name, he looked on his desk, and in front of him was sitting a neurology book, a book about language, and a book about computer programming. And he said, okay, we'll just call it NLP. Neuro-linguistic programming, from the 3 books that he had sitting in front of him. Now, some people say they came up with the term from a guy that wrote a book in 1933 named, I think it's Alfred Korbzinski, and the book is called Science and Sanity. It's like a 900-page monster that they said is only a few people have really been able to go in and read and find out what the information that he was saying in there. And he coined the word neurolinguistics back in 1933. So anyways, Richard Bandler and John Grinder are the ones that made NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, popular and famous. The Greek word for neuro is neuron, obviously the brain and the nervous system. And then linguistic is language. Now, language in our brains are just maps and models. There's one of the things that we'll talk about that's a presupposition of NLP, which means that the meaning is presupposed in what they say, is the map is not the territory. What does that mean? You look at a Rand McNally atlas of going from New York to California or New York to Ohio, you're seeing a map, but that isn't the actual territory. It's a representation of the territory. And what happens in the nervous system is that when we use language, we use the word run. You look at the dictionary, there's about 50 meanings of the word run. It could be a car running. It could be running for office. It could be running with your legs. It could be your fan is running, your car is running. There's all kinds of different meanings for running. And then every person that has the word running in their head has a different definition of what running is. So you can see that it begins to get complicated when you want to be able to communicate with people in general situations where a man and a woman, let's say, are in a relationship and there is a problem, and they might have a word over garbage, taking the garbage out. What taking the garbage out means to the woman, what taking the garbage out means to the man, can be completely different representational programs in their mind. So NLP is a study of how we represent this language in the brain. If you think about our 5 senses, we've got sight, hearing, we have kinesthetic, which is touch, There's different types of kinesthetic. There's internal kinesthetic, which is like emotions, and then there's external, which are feelings like pressure, heat, cold. So there's different ones, but basically when we say kinesthetics, it's feelings. So somebody has an emotion, we say they're kinesthetic. I feel bad. I feel great. I feel fantastic. Kinesthetic. I feel the wind blowing against my legs. Kinesthetic. So you have auditory. Again, auditory can be two different ways too. It can be auditory, which is you're hearing my voice on the external part of your ears right now, and then you could be going, this guy's crazy, or this guy's fantastic. On the inside, and that's internal auditory. Same thing with the visual. You could be looking at a computer screen. You could have your eyes closed and be looking at the computer screen of your imagination. One's internal visual, one's external visual. But we take the word run, or we take the word garbage, and we have a complex pattern of these different representations in our brain, and we communicate with that. What NLP does is NLP starts taking little bits of this information and chunking it down into what the representation, how it's represented. Let's say you're in a I'm sure you've probably been into like a Best Buy here in America. It's a big electronics store where they sell televisions and stereos and things like that. And almost every single one of them, they have a wall of TVs. And if you look at this wall of TVs, you will see some screens are brighter than others, some are duller than others, some are on one channel, some are on another channel, some the color is sharper, some the color is more faded, the contrast. So you've got all those, the tint, all those different options. You're looking at each TV. Well, in the mind, those same options happen. So what we find is that these tiny distinctions in all these different representational, so you've got those same distinctions inside your head as you look at those TV screens outside your head. The same thing with sound. You know, when you listen to a song, it has one meaning, but if you get a good musician, a lot of times say that song stinks, it sucks, and you go, wait a minute, I love that song. That's a great song. Because you're looking at the song as a whole, and then the meanings and the feelings that has with you. He is looking at it or listening to it as a conglomeration of different instruments, and he might find one of the instruments in there that are just so off tune or off beat to him as a musician that it just ruins the whole song. So what NLP does is it's like a treasure hunt. It starts to go after these fine distinctions, these fine representational differences in the mind to be able to help you get the most useful representations. Now let's go back to why NLP was created, how to make or create excellence within you or others. So let's say that you've got a guy that is extremely good at seducing women. And when you go to see a woman, you buckle up with, or your knees buckle with fear. Now, he is doing something inside of his body different than what you're doing inside your body. He's doing something different inside of his mind than what you're doing inside of your mind. So what Richard Bandler and what NLP and John Grinder and all the people and myself have done is we have been on this treasure hunt to find out what is it that these guys that are successful have done to be able to communicate with a woman that good and to have her attracted that much. And when we find these distinctions, we're able to take it like a computer program. That's where the programming part comes in, and actually shift the internal software of another person. So I would actually be able to take what this master seducer, this guy that's really great with women, I can model that, find out what he's doing, get down to fine distinctions about what he's doing, get it in what we call a strategy in NLP, take that strategy and then work with you to implement that strategy inside of you, and you're going to start getting similar results. It's amazing how it works. It's just not about women. It's about sales. It can be about swimming. Any and every professional sports team and professional sports star in this country has an NLP coach right now. Greg Louganis was one of the first ones, the Olympic diver. He had NLP coaches working with him. One of my teachers actually knows the guy that was working with him. And what they would do is they would model his own excellence. They would find out what he did on great dives as compared to fantastic dives. and then whichever one was better, they would be able to take those distinctions, put the new software in, and then have him diving better and better and better. Lance Armstrong, same thing. He's doing fantastic. He's out there. He's got those kind of people working with him for his health. He's got them working with him for his riding. Any of your sports team, they say sports psychologists, your golfers, all using NLP right now, all using hypnosis. Richard Bandler said he was using hypnosis for years, and everybody freaked out, and all the doctors freaked out about it, didn't want to do it, so he invented a form of hypnosis that nobody would freak out about, and he called it NLP, open eye hypnosis, but he called it NLP, so he could do whatever he wanted to do, and people would leave him alone. That's why I put NLP and hypnosis together, because they are so closely related together in this, and you'll see as we get further and further into the trainings. I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, but once you've got this downloaded, you can go back and listen to it over and over again as many times as you want to. So again, NLP is the language of the brain, and how that language is represented through the brain, run through the brain, and then into behavior. That's the key. Is how do we transform this internal representation, this internal map that we have of language, and turn it into behavior that is extremely useful for you? How do we turn it into emotions and feelings that make your life that much more worth living? And that's what we're here about with this. Let's talk about phobias a little bit. This is one of the way Richard Bandler said he really discovered excellence. He said he was looking, and he realized that most of the people that had phobias, let's say fear of elevators was one he talked about, a lot of the people that had fear of elevators, when they went to a therapist or psychiatrist to get help, said the actual time, some of the brief therapy was 6 months at the time, and most of the time they figured about 2 years before they could get over the phobia. And Bandler just thought that was something that he could shorten down dramatically. All computer programmers, if we can figure a way to get it easier, simpler, get it done quicker and faster, we're going to do it. And look at what's happened since the 80s with computers and where they are now. That comes from the belief that we can do it quicker and faster, and we've taken that and applied that to the human brain. It hasn't caught on that much in the mainstream medical or psychological community, but in alternative therapies, it's huge, and the mainstream is now. I know I've trained some of the trainings with hypnosis, medical doctors, trained psychiatrists from state universities, state hospitals, lawyers are coming in there, naturopaths, you name it, they're coming in. They want to know about NLP and hypnosis now and how it can be used. Anyways, back to Richard Bandler. Now, I'm going to be doing a lot of that also. What Bandler calls that is open loops, where I'll start a story and then kind of veer off to another story. It's hypnotic in nature. It's meant to get into your unconscious mind at a deep level to install this stuff in. So a lot of it you don't have to memorize and try to remember what it is. If you get it into a useful state, and I use stories and metaphors, analogies, similes, and things like that, it will get in an unconscious level using the hypnotic techniques that I've been using in hypnotic language for years into your unconscious mind in a quicker way, and it'll be there for you to remember. So what Bandler did was he had the people that were going on elevators and afraid of elevators, and so he said, you know what, there's got to be a way to get around this. And what he did is he said, we've studied how the problem is, but let's see if we can study what makes the difference of people maybe that have gotten away from this by themselves. What about people that have cured themselves, or people that have actually had the shift through therapy? What happened? And what he did was he put an ad in the paper. And I'm giving these stories about Bandler as best I can now, listening to his tapes and his CDs and stuff. And he said he put an ad in the paper, and he said he got about 200 respondents to this. Well, I'm getting a phone call. Hold on a second. Okay, where were we now? So we were talking about that's the beauty of podcasting, by the way, is, you get interrupted, and why edit it all out there? It's the reality of what's going on. So what Bandler did was he started studying, put the ad, he got about 200 people that responded to it, and he started asking them about what had happened. And the people that had gotten over it by themselves, they just kind of said, I don't know, one day I was just kind of sitting there, and then it snapped, and I realized as I looked at the situation, this way, all of a sudden it didn't bother me anymore. Well, after so many people, he didn't have to go through all the people that responded to the ad. He started hearing the same thing over and over and over again. These people were doing the same type of representation, internal representation in their minds that had gotten over their phobias. So Bandler tells one of the stories where he set up by this elevator, this glass elevator in a tall building, and put a little sign out there, saying he will cure elevator phobias for $5. And he was able to start knocking these phobias out of people in less than a half an hour, in about 20 minutes. Nobody could believe that that's what he was doing, but one after another he knocked them out. So going back to the process of what happened was, he went back, he knew what was wrong, he knew what the process of how people ran phobias, and now he knew the process of people that had phobias and got over them, and what was the thing that they did in the middle to get over the phobia. And that's basically what NLP is. So you've got your problem state, which is the phobia. You've got your outcome state, which is getting past the phobia, free of the phobia. And then you have the process in between of transferring yourself out of the phobia into a calm state, or a happy state, or whatever state it is that you want to get into outside the phobia, a useful state outside the phobia. NLP is that little part in between those two that focuses on what is the process of excellence, of success. The success and the excellence of getting you from a state that is not useful, that can cause all kinds of problems in your life, into a state that is useful. Tony Robbins, who was one of the people that studied under Richard Bandler and came out there and really, Richard Bandler actually has in the beginning of one of his books something that says that he considers Tony Robbins a genius. And I asked him at a seminar one time in San Francisco, I said, now was that, because I knew you guys had some problems, I said, was that a compliment or was that something else? He goes, no, that was a compliment. He goes, Tony Robbins is a marketing genius. What he did with NLP and took it out there and made a lot of money from it, he said he is a marketing genius. What Tony Robbins said was he thought NLP was the science of programming or reprogramming your own brain. Another quick little story. What we talk about when we say problems, a lot of times problems are a certain process that happens in your brain that we might consider a lemon. And another thing that NLP does, and that's what Tony Robbins was talking about when he said reprogramming your own brain, taking the process and say, is it useful? If we have a bunch of lemons, are we stuck with lemons? Do we want to get rid of lemons and get apples? Or do we want to do something with the lemons, since we already have so many of them, to make it useful? And that into lemonade, let's say, lemons into lemonade. And so some of the things that happens in NLP is, how do we take something that's already in existence in the brain, and instead of trying to take it out and put something new in there, how do we make it useful? One of the things, I'll give you a quick story, again with a tape that I watched, a videotape of interaction between Richard Bandler and a schizophrenic. His name is Andy. And there's probably going to be more than one Andy story, because Andy is just an incredible individual. But Andy had hallucinations. And Andy had, I don't know if you remember, years ago there was the Little House on the Prairie TV show. And it was about Michael Landon and different, him and his wife and the kids who lived out in the prairie. They had a little house on the prairie. And there was this one girl that was one of the neighbor girls that was quite annoying, and her name was Mary. And Mary used to jump out of the TV and chase Andy around the living room, and it would drive Andy nuts. And he hated this Mary, and it was part of, what his schizophrenia was. Well, from turning a lemon into lemonade, Richard Bandler looks at it and goes, wow, he goes, could you tell me how you do this? And Andy kind of looked at him funny, and he says, yeah, he goes, I want to know how to do this. He goes, this is fantastic. And he had Andy, again, this is like a reframe. Andy starts looking at it as a problem, or initially looks at it as a problem, now starts to go, why does he want to know? He's interested because he sees some use for it. And so Bandler tells Andy, he goes, yeah, he goes, this is a multi-million-dollar idea, Andy. And he goes, how's that? He says, well, think Playboy Channel. And Andy did that. He goes, yeah. He goes, if you could get Mary running around chasing you, he goes, if I can figure out how to model this and get Playboy Playmates to come out and start chasing you around, if you get the idea of what he's saying there. So that takes a process that's useful and says, okay, here's Mary that comes out of the TV, chases him around, but what if we were able to take a Playboy Playmate and do the same thing? Reframes it. Andy looks at it totally differently. Now, how many of those things do you have in your life that could be taken a look at it in a whole different way, that could be reprogrammed or programmed, as Bandler says, or not Bandler, Tony Robbins, or the search of excellence? What is excellence for you? What is excellence for you in interaction with a woman? What would be excellent to be able to communicate and to have a woman or to have a partner that you could look at and feel and hear in totally different ways, and to have those processes work different in you, so what she does that used to annoy you now may make you laugh, and what maybe you can be able to do to her inside of her that used to make her angry at you and now makes her attracted to you. So there's different processes that we can get into in the future. This gives you a basic idea, a little bit about the history of NLP. Hypnosis, you can all go on the internet and you got an idea what hypnosis is. I'll be sharing with you about how Milton Erickson's Milton model, which is part of NLP, is relevant somewhere down the line. I don't know how we're going to take this, but we'll take it a little bit at a time as I learned it from the manual, and I'll be adding stuff of my own in there about what I've learned in life, what I've learned about with the hundreds of clients that I've worked with over the years. So you're getting the benefit of not just learning basic NLP training, but applied NLP training, applied hypnotic training, and then all in one, how this all fits together. If you get a chance, go out and get some basic beginner NLP books. I can probably put some on there for you next time, but if you do some searches, just do a search on NLP, and they'll rank them, beginner, intermediate, advanced. Get some basic NLP books and read about it, and that way when you're hearing me talking, it's going to amplify it. The fast track method that I worked with, reading a bunch of books, listening to a bunch of tapes first, and then going to a 14-day class, made the fast track class just an amazing way to go. So if you'll go out there and get some information and start reading and learning a little bit about it, then listen to this audio over again and listen to the MP3s that we're going to be adding on to this in the future, you're going to be able to really get on a fast track, learn this, and have a lot of fun with it at the same time. So we didn't even get through. We got through about half my notes, and I figured that the notes I had would be enough to get me through about a half an hour, and I believe we're at a half an hour, over half an hour, and I'm about halfway through. So lots of material out there, guys and girls. Write back with your questions. I'll put an email address there. I'll put my website address. I'll put anything else I see relevant, email. And if you want to email me with questions or suggestions or something that didn't make sense to you or wasn't clear to you, email it to me, because I'm sure there's going to be other people that had the same type of question. I will respond to it and expand on it to make your learning and your experience that much better. So thanks for listening to Hypnosis and NLP for Volume 1. We'll keep going with it, and I'll probably put one out within the next week. Other than that, take care.
And thanks for listening. Again, if you want to get in touch with me, it's mark@markjryan.com. If you want to go to my website and check out what I've been doing lately, it's markjryan.com, M-A-R-K, the initial J, RYAN.com. And I've got a couple new podcasts that I'm starting to do that's just going to be basically ideas, and these ideas in general, and more spiritually oriented, and that is the Mark J. Ryan Experience. And I think you can get that on iTunes and some of the other aggregators for podcasting. So thanks for listening. We'll put out another episode fairly soon. Thanks. Have a great day and a great week. Enjoy. This podcast is brought to you by The Secret Meditation. Learn to get in touch with the magical frequency, the frequency that will change your life now. Find The Secret Meditation at www.thesecretmeditation.com.